Well, I hope you enjoyed the shows over the last 45, 46 episodes or so. We've got 3 or 4 more left in the series. Then next week, Monday, will be our final one. So do tell all your friends to come and join us for our last 4 or 5 shows. We've got some amazing guests lined up to take you through to the conclusion. And of course, it's not really an end. It's kind of the end of the beginning, if you like. Because remember, every single week we put a new Fat and Furious podcast live. Every couple of days we put new recipe ideas up for you to enjoy, and it's all about living healthy and happy. So if you want a place to come to on YouTube or social media, just remember Primal Living. We're here for you. We're all about helping you put life into your years, and it'd be great if you could to maybe follow us on Facebook, or is it Instagram you follow on and like on the, I don't remember, I'm not very good at social media, but I know we're very good as a company at doing it. So we are on YouTube, obviously, because that's where we are today, but also you can follow us on Facebook and you can follow us on Instagram. And it's all about helping you put life into years. And with your amazing support over the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've now managed, I've had a little look on Just Giving this morning, we've now managed to raise over £26,000 for the Trussell Trust. So again, thank you to everybody that's made contributions. My family and I are going to double we've already put quite a lot in, but we're going to double everybody's donations. So keep them coming in over the last 4 days, because more than ever, the food banks across the UK need our support. You can support by giving to Just Giving up here. You can support by making a donation to the text number. And then on top of the financial donations, let's remember what the food banks really are after is us to put food into those collection boxes in our local supermarkets. And what I really like about that scheme is that every time we make a donation into those boxes, it goes to somebody in our local community. And more than ever, families in your area or in my area need our help. And on the right of the screen there is the kind of things that they're asking us to put into those collection boxes. And as we draw to an end of this series, with, like I say, 3 or 4 to go, we've been running 2 competitions. We will next week announce the winner. Maybe we'll announce the winners on the last day, which is next Monday. And the 2 competitions, one is we've been asking you, what have you cooked for the first time during lockdown? Hopefully you've got some inspiration for some of our brilliant guests we've had on, from our top award-winning chefs, the Caldesis, through to the brilliant Dr. Jen and David Unwin, and all our guests giving ideas around food. And of course, Ivor Cummins with his brilliant cookbook too. And we've also had Dr. James Gornick on with his cookbook. So loads and loads of ideas, hopefully giving you inspiration. And then if you can keep putting your photographs on to YouTube, not YouTube, sorry, onto Facebook, that would be fantastic. And then on next Monday, we'll pick a winner, our favourite recipe, to hand out prizes. And then the other competition we've had was our food facts, which we've been doing nearly every day. We've missed a couple. And if you're just joining us, the competition's dead simple. Just go back through the entire series. Look for the green box where we do the food fact. Write down what the food fact is. So today it is olives and olive oil. And literally list as many as you can. At the end, the very last day, we'll ask you to keep putting your comments up. Or in fact, what we might do on Sunday is ask everybody after the show on Sunday to put their comments up. And then overnight, we'll pick in a winner and announce it on the Monday. And the reason I picked olives today is olive oils are great for so many things within the body. I'm interested to find out from our guest today whether they help with the brain function. I certainly believe omega-3s do, so I'm going to guess olive oils do, but let's wait and see. And olive oils are great because they are really well, organised as an organisation. It's the International Olive Committee that tell us what rules we need to call it extra virgin oil and also virgin oil. So they're really well regulated. So all the information there on your screen. But olives are super to eat and they're great as an oil. Jack's giving me the thumbs up. Good morning, Jack. How are you?
Good. How is everyone else?
I'm sure everybody's very, very good. We can't see you, Jack, though. Were you shy this morning? Or you're busy?
No,
You're just busy.
I'm just there.
You're just there. Hello, Jack. That's my son, Jack. quite excited. He's done very well, hasn't he? Don't you think? Putting all these shows together. But I think he's quite excited that he's got just 4 more. He's looking forward to a lie-in, which most 18-year-olds have had. But of course, he's been up at silly o'clock every morning helping put these shows together. How are we getting on with connecting to our guests this morning, Jack? We have our guests. That is fantastic. So without further ado, let's go straight to London to speak to a cognitive specialist who is Emer MacSweeney. Good morning, Emma. How are you?
Morning. Very well, thank you.
Excellent. We've got you working. Well done to your team.
Yeah, thank you.
Technology sometimes is just... Anyway, there we go. So let's jump straight in. We've done a lot of coverage over the last month on sort of diabetes, on metabolic syndrome. We've done a lot. Yesterday we talked about the liver, but we haven't really yet touched on the brain. And of course, it's probably one of the most vital organs. So teach us a little bit about what a cognitive specialist is, what you do within your organisation, and then how do we, through the food choices we make, start to think more about protecting and looking after our brain.
Okay, so there are a few questions there all at once.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think the first thing is to say that the key thing that we've done is that over the last 10 years, we've set up a company called Cognition Health, and that's working with a team of really amazing brain and mind experts. And we're very focused on trying to advance the diagnosis and treatment of many of the conditions that affect our cognition. So probably the first thing is to say, what is our cognition? And cognition is really just our thinking ability. So any conditions, either developmental or degenerative, that result in the decline or prevention in the normal development of our thinking ability is really the area that we particularly focus on. And this sort of really includes a lot of what we call cognitive domains. So it's everything from memory, particularly short-term memory, to our calculation ability to plan, judgment, decision-making, sort of all the things that you think of as your intellectual function. And unfortunately, there are a number of conditions which affect this. And probably the one that most people are talking about and is the most common, particularly as we grow older, is Alzheimer's disease. And that's now become really sort of like a very big sort of socioeconomic problem because it's so common and obviously so devastating.
Yeah,
So
we have that in our family with my mother and my dad's doing a great job. They both just turned 80. In fact, my mum turned 80 this week. But it's interesting, isn't it? Short-term, long-term, how they can be wildly different. She'll tell everybody 20 times in an hour that I was only £4. Look at him now. He was only £4 when he was born, but she can't remember the fact she's told me that 20 times in the hour, bless her. So the brain is, that's what I'm really interested to learn in this session with you. You know, what can we do to help slow down that? And also what can we do for our younger generation and even myself to try and make sure that doesn't happen to us?
Yeah, well, and actually, one of the things that you described there, that your mother will remember the day that you were born, but she may not necessarily remember what she had for breakfast, or as you say, that she told you that 10 minutes earlier. And one of the strange things about the brain is that the memories that went in first stay in the longest. It's the memories that are just going in, that are being created, and the new pathways being created in the brain that are the ones that are most affected. So a lot of people think that because their long-term memory is completely intact, that the fact that they have problems with short-term memory is just a sort of like some normal function of aging, which 100% is not the case. And one of the reasons why it's so important to be able to recognize the symptoms is because that's what prompts people to then go and seek help. And today there are lots of new things that we're now aware of and access to new medications, which are designed very differently from the existing medications and which are designed to actually slow down and ideally halt further progression of this sort of really very difficult disease.
Absolutely. And I'm going to jump all over the place. I've got a lot of questions written down, but I'm just jump all over the place. Why are people now referring to Alzheimer's as sort of diabetes type 3?
Well, there are lots of, and this actually is, I think particularly pertinent for this program. There are lots of links to diet and also to the presence of ketones and sugar, and the importance of sugar metabolism, etc., in the brain. So I think the main sort of association is just because, one, there is certainly an increased instance of this in the context of diabetes, but also in relation to the way the brain handles different, if you like, different foods, so fats, sugars, cholesterol, etc. So maybe that might be of more interest to discuss in more detail.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about the foods that sort of drive and promote a healthy brain compared to those that may be part of the, let's divide maybe the problem to maybe the solution or the prevention.
Yeah.
Maybe drive those into sort of two different categories for us if you can.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to say is that actually the brain is a very fatty organism, or organ. So over 60% of the dry weight of the brain is actually fat, and it's mostly a sort of cholesterol-rich organ, or the most cholesterol-rich organ in the body, in fact. So actually, despite what you sort of like always read about fat being bad for you, it's actually essential for the brain to function normally. There are other things as well that are essential for the brain to function normally, which we can talk about too. But with respect to fat, it's also particularly the omega-3, like fatty acid, which is very important. And that's because they're polyunsaturated fats, and they're responsible for the maintenance of normal brain function. And that's sort of like fish oil primarily, which contains two types of fatty acids, the EPA and the DHA. So ensuring that you have enough of these components in your diet is absolutely essential. And they have a critical role in sort of anti-inflammatory problems as well, and also not only in the maintenance of good brain function, but in the development of the brain. So it's really important right throughout age or life. This isn't something that you just start at the last minute. It's something that, unlike sort of like health of your heart and everything else, you have to be working on it from the very beginning.
So how do you do that with children? Because not many children. I've got I've got 7 children in total, but I've got 3 that I'd say are young. The older ones, no problem, but the younger ones, how do I get them to eat more fish? Because my understanding is that EPA and DHA predominantly come from animal sources, whereas from vegetable sources you get a different type called ALA, but that's not as effective on the brain. So if it mainly comes from fish sources, how do I encourage my children to eat more fish? Or is there other ways of getting it?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that children on the whole aren't that crazy about fish, but I mean, the other thing is that it is in seeds and nuts and things like that. So I think that sorry, I don't know if you've got that noise. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. I know you're very busy.
But quite often children are slightly more amenable to sort of seeds, nuts, things like that. Obviously, unfortunately, like nut allergy is an issue sort of increasingly, but I don't know. I think it's sort of probably trying to train them to like eating those things. And if you can get them, certainly sort of it's salmon and mackerel, anchovies. Again, I appreciate they're not really tastes that children particularly go for. But I think it's probably, as you said earlier, it's the combination of trying to increase the consumption of the good things, but it's also decreasing the consumption of the bad things. Mm-hmm. And the thing that is particularly bad for the brain is sugar. So again, all the things we like. So, it's the sort of like the cakes and the sweets and things like that are bad. But, like everything, it's doing things sensibly and in moderation. And it's maintaining, I think really the sort of 3 big things. It's maintaining a sensible diet. Exercise is extremely important, and I think getting into the habit of exercising well when you're young is crucial. And then the other one, which I think people are increasingly now sort of conscious of is sleep, and getting good and appropriate sleep is very important as well.
Can we come to the sleep one in a second, because I've got quite a few questions for you around sleep. But if we just can go back to the food one for a second. So we know today that kids aren't eating as much fish. They're definitely eating more sweets because they're just everywhere. And it appears that Alzheimer's, for example, shows its face in later years. But is it like a build-up effect? In other words, do I need to be saying to my children and recommending to the people that watch us to say, look, although it tends to happen in later years, it's actually a path that you travel on, and you have to even be conscious of the food that you're giving, from children's age. They might not suffer Alzheimer's now, but you're on this path building up to the damage of the brain. Is that correct, or?
It is correct, but at the same time, I don't think I would have children, becoming neurotic about their brains, and also their brains are still developing at this age. I think that, as I said, in everything, it's a balance, and essentially, what's good for your heart is good for your brain, and vice versa. Certainly, we do know that the proteins which ultimately are highly associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease later in life do actually build up long before you actually present with symptoms, let's say, of short-term memory loss, due to the very early stages of Alzheimer's. So, we have gazillions of brain cells, and it's not like you suddenly wake up one morning and you have dementia. It obviously isn't like that. It's a case of these abnormal proteins gradually building up in the brain, and then they reach a tipping point where they have destroyed a significant or a specific number of brain cells, such that you now become conscious of the fact that you're at a critical level of brain cells. And then as you lose more, you start to develop more symptoms. But again, I think advice to sort of like parents for children, and for all of us, as just through adulthood, is it's it's keeping the brain and the body but well hydrated. That's really important. Our brain's about 70% water, which is probably a bit disappointing for most people to learn, but that's the case. And then it's things like vitamin D, it's tryptophan that you get in leafy vegetables and beef and eggs, selenium, which is found in, again, eggs, shellfish, nuts, particularly Brazil nuts, magnesium, similar sort of things. It's fruit, it's nuts, it's seeds. Garlic is very good. Zinc from meat and shellfish, and again, nuts and seeds. And Q10, which is found in meats and beef, sardines, things like that. So,
okay, can I just stop you there one more time, because that's absolutely brilliant. I want to come back to all those things you just mentioned. A doctor said to me the other day when we were talking about this, he said, look, I'm not an expert in this area at all, but he said, I like to try and paint a picture that people can understand. And this is what he said to me. He said, if you live in an area with really clean water and you've got your kettle, or you're always putting, say, mineral water in that kettle, it probably won't build up like lime scale, and if it does, it won't build up much. But he said, if you just keep putting, crappy water in there, and you eventually get lots and lots of lime scale build up, he said that's kind of an analogy for Alzheimer's. If you keep eating the wrong food, it's like building up the lime scale inside the kettle in the brain that eventually becomes so full of the lime scale, it starts to cause problems. Is that a good analogy, or is that misleading?
No, I think that's a very reasonable analogy. And it is a case of, yes, we're just sort of like, you want to try and minimize the amount that you're poisoning yourself. And I think one of the things that's really important is that brain cells, unlike most other cells in the body, cannot regenerate. So when you lose brain cells, you can't get them back. And that's one of the reasons why it's really important to be very sort of careful of them, if you like. So unlike if you break your arm and you put your arm in plaster, and when you take it off, all the muscle cells are all sort of a bit thin and weedy. But as soon as you do all your physio and everything, they all come back. But the problem with the brain cells, I said, is they don't come back. And that's why, in addition to diet, exercise, sleep, and just protective mechanisms. The other thing for people who actually do have, have got to the point where they have actually started to develop symptoms of cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's, that's where we're sort of also very focused on giving them the opportunity to get early access to an accurate diagnosis, and then also access to these new generation medications, which are actually designed to try to solve the underlying problem. So in other words, try to clear out of the brain these abnormal proteins that have developed, and to try to slow down further progression of disease and symptoms. So essentially, it's a bit like in your kettle analogy, trying to sort of like get a descaler to try and clear out the kettle.
Yeah, got it.
You can't necessarily get it back to normal, but to try and stop more brain cells from being affected.
Yeah. So got it. Fantastic. A second ago, you reeled off vitamin D, tryptophan, selenium, magnesium, garlic, zinc, Q10. One of the things we're talking a lot around sort of generic health is that as a nation, we're very much overfed but undernourished. And really what you just reeled off then was a list of nutrients, that we've known for a while we should have in our the sort of 14 minerals that we're told we should be getting on a regular basis and 13 vitamins. And as a nation, if we keep getting overfed and lots of carbs, which don't tend to come packed with vitamins and minerals, and what you've really just said there is get back to eating real food, I think, isn't it, in a nutshell?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, I know that, there are lots of podcasts about the importance of food and actually how the types of food we're eating also affect our appetite. So I think that, it's pretty well recognized that if you are eating a very high sugar diet, then that will actually stimulate the brain to keep thinking it's hungry. So unfortunately, you get into a vicious circle where you're potentially eating the wrong things or too much of the wrong thing. And then that sort of stimulates the brain to want more of that. So part of it is trying to get into a habit, like habit forming, to get into a healthy circuit so that you're eating more healthy things. And that actually does drive the brain to, if you like, make the right decisions to eat more of the right things.
Yeah. No, that's such a valid point. We just don't. I say to a lot of people, especially if they're overweight, we try to help them. It's not your fault, but there's lots of things we can do. But the first thing is recognise it's not your fault. The hormones play a part in making you decide what to eat. Even your bacteria in your stomach could be driving you to eat certain things. So I'm totally on the page with you there. So food, definitely. Teach us a little bit about, you mentioned a moment ago, getting a good night's sleep and how that's important for the brain. Why is that the case?
Well, I think it's the case for a number of reasons, and probably even loads of reasons that not just I don't recognise, but we generally don't recognise. But in terms of these sort of cognitive problems, in terms of Alzheimer's, etc., one of the things is that it is now recognised that actually during sleep we not only, if you like, fix and reset our brains in terms of all our thinking ability and everything, but actually there is evidence that it does, it's during sleep that we actually clear out a lot of these more toxic proteins, etc. So particularly this amyloid protein, which is one of the key things involved in Alzheimer's. So it's both, if you like, a resetting of the computer, but it's also a sort of like a house cleaning of the brain and resetting a lot of the chemicals, if you like, the neurochemicals in the brain.
So a bit like fasting is good for clearing out the stomach and rebooting the stomach and getting it back in working order. Sleeping is good for sort of house cleansing within the brain. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's two things. It's those things happen when we are actually sleeping, but if we're not sleeping, then it's like, if you like, positive bad things are happening to the brain. So it's a double, it's like a double thing. It's like not sleeping is bad and sleeping is very good. It's not like not sleeping is just neutral. It is actually bad for our brains not to sleep.
And for my teenager son over there who's still at university, or supposed to be at university, sleeping is important, is it not? Because what you learn in the daytime, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is what you learn in that daytime, if you have a bad night's sleep, you don't organise it as well, but if you have a good night's sleep, it's like the filing cabinets are opening, storing things in the right places, so that it becomes easier to recall them later.
It's that. So it's the ability to be able to organise and then recall, and lay down the sort of like memories and everything. But it's actually also, there are lots of studies that have been done that demonstrate that when you are tired, your cognitive performance is significantly affected. So it's not just the sort of like storing things for long term. It's your ability to function the next day as well that is actually alarmingly quite significantly affected. Yeah. So I mean, I sort of think, I remember someone telling me some time ago, not in the context of cognition or anything, but really just in the context of like performance, and saying, if you've got a big meeting the next day or something like that, or an exam, etc., your best weapon is sleep. Mm-hmm. Particularly if you're in a competitive environment. If you need to perform better than anyone else, the sleep is possibly at the right time is your best weapon.
Yeah, and I guess the problem there, isn't it, that when you've got that big sports event the next day, or the big exam the next day, or your driving test the next day, when you need the most sleep, your brain's probably the most active it's going to be. So you're at this war the whole time. So if you can find a way of cracking that sleep under pressure, fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's the conundrum for everyone.
Now, earlier on you said that the brain is 60% fat, and then you said when it's dry, and then its normal weight is predominantly water. So if it's predominantly water and fat, we've talked about eating healthy fats. How important then is hydration if there's a lot of water in the brain?
Yeah, hydration is really important. And in fact, I think most people like sort of have a sense, they know when they're a bit dehydrated, just in terms of their brain function. But I just sort of like can't stress that enough. It is really, really important to be well hydrated. I think actually all of us are probably not well hydrated most of the time, including me. But because you sort of just, if you're busy, you just forget to drink or whatever. But it is really, really important. I don't know how else to put it.
No, that's great. That's great. Now, you mentioned earlier on, this is all news to me, that part of the problem is abnormal proteins building up inside the brain. Is that from us eating the wrong proteins, or are we creating those proteins from eating the wrong foods?
I don't know, and I don't think that is actually known. What also is the sort of like missing information, if you like, is why is it that some people might do exactly the same thing, and one person might develop cognitive impairment, whereas somebody else may not, and that obviously happens quite frequently too. So it's really just a statistical thing. Like, the better, the more you can decrease your odds, the better. So it's a sort of statistical thing. Okay. So most people are sort of building up these proteins, but for some people, it seems to be more of a problem. Mm-hmm. There is a tiny percentage of people, like less than about 3% of people globally, who do have a genetic link. But to be honest, for the majority of people, it is really just age is the biggest risk factor. So more likely than not, it is just an accumulation thing. But for some reason, some people, like most conditions, like some people are more susceptible than others. So like some people get diabetes and they have exactly the same diet as somebody else who doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's not just on that.
I always tell people, because it's important to support people that have got it and to make sure that you don't look down on them. And I tell a very, very true story about a friend of mine who was a rocket scientist. Well, I suppose he still is technically a rocket scientist, but developed severe Alzheimer's at a very, very young age. So It's just people need to realise that it can happen to anybody, even the smartest of brains.
Yeah. I mean, we see lots of people at Recognition Health who have been incredibly intelligent and high performing in their career, and it's just exactly the same as you can have a absolutely first class Olympic gold medal athlete who damages their knee or their arm and can no longer perform at that level. I mean, it's no different. It's just a condition, an imbalance of something in the brain that has resulted in the cognitive brain cells being selectively affected, so effectively being selectively killed off. And it's a case of trying to just restore the equilibrium in the brain. So it's just the same as trying the sort of new treatments are really designed just in exact the same way that statins bring down cholesterol, or insulin and anti-diabetic medications will restore normal blood sugar levels. It's just trying to restore the abnormal accumulation of these proteins that has occurred over a period of time in the brain.
Yeah. What about stress? So if somebody's a stressy, because we always try and find the reason, don't we? Like say with my mother, spent many years quite stressed, and therefore elevated cortisol levels. Would a sort of a prolonged elevated cortisol level may be part of the problem?
I don't know that it is directly, in so much as that obviously lots of people are subjected to stress over periods of time. I mean, there's a completely different thing such as like PTSD or whatever, which is again a completely different situation. But I think what is more relevant is that people who are stressed, and particularly who are depressed, that does affect their cognition. Now that invariably is affecting their cognition in a way that if you can solve the stress and you can solve the depression, then it's a reversible cognitive, it's a reversible factor that is affecting your cognition. So it's really important, if you are worried about your cognition, to find out what the cause is, and if it is reversible, to try to treat that as soon as possible. Whereas obviously if it's a progressive cause such as Alzheimer's, then it's a completely different management. But the other thing, which is part of the vicious circle, is that if you are worried about your cognition and you have complete insight into that, then you're going to get stressed, worried and depressed, and then that exacerbates the effect on your cognition. So it can become quite a vicious circle. So definitely they all get interconnected.
Got it. And we hear, don't we, about boxers taking blows to the head, and you mentioned earlier on that most brains, well, you said all brain cells don't regenerate. We've got what we've got. We hear boxers taking a blow to the head, causing problems. Every glass of wine kills a few off, or what's the score there? Because I like my wine.
Okay, well, two things. The boxers, and every time your head is hit, is not literally every time your head is hit, but if you are subjected to repetitive brain trauma, and obviously boxing, American football, rugby are the sort of classic examples, then there is a condition which is called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, which there's an increasing amount of publicity and public awareness of now. And that really particularly started with the NFL and the American football players. And yes, this is a condition which has lots of similarities to Alzheimer's disease, in so much it is also a build-up and an abnormal reaction to certain tau proteins in the brain. And it does spread through the brain in the same way as the tau protein does in Alzheimer's. So yes, there's huge sort of connections there. Can you have a glass of wine? I hope so. Yes, I mean, again, I think it's, like the Greek philosophy, like a middle course is best. Obviously, excess alcohol does kill off brain cells. Yes, it's bad for you. And actually, sort of drinking more than two glasses of wine does degrade the quality of your sleep as well. So if you've had more than 2 glasses of wine, you're not going to sleep well. But I think everybody knows that it's also important to relax and be sociable, and in fact, social interaction, everything is hugely important for our brains.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an expert on wine or anything, so don't quote me, but yeah, it's important.
Now, some years back, a brilliant nutritionist, Patrick Holford, who's written about 40 books, did an experiment in Wales with children at a special needs school. And they, over a period of time, they had a placebo group, and they had the group that they gave mainly a multivitamin, but predominantly all the B vitamins. And they reckoned that at the end of the test, all the professors thought they were mad, but at the end of the test, they reckoned about 10% of the children that were taking the B vitamins every morning, if they were to continue, that would have come out of that group and gone onto the normal spectrum. Is B vitamin something we, not so much as a supplement, but food rich in it, is that something we need to be very conscious of as they're water soluble and the body can't retain them?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Vitamin B, probably most easily taken as a B complex level, but vitamin B and folate are very important for brain function. And in fact, when we have patients here, we always check their B12 and folate within the normal range. So yes, it is important to have B12 and folate. One of the other things, and I can't sort of, I mean, I actually know Patrick Holford, but I can't comment like specifically on this particular study. But one of the things that is emerging is for children with autism spectrum. Now that's now like, it's sort of like being redefined. So it's really a big spectrum of, if you like, not so much conditions, but a big range. What has increasingly been shown that the microbiome, so in other words, the microbes that are just normally in the gut, are very important in this condition. And there are some sort of like relatively early sort of clinical trials going on at the minute, which are actually looking at significantly changing the microbiome in children with autism and other conditions and other learning disability conditions, and finding, particularly if it's done when the children are very young, finding significant changes. So there is a lot of work around both vitamins and in particular in sort of like folate as well. Again, it's like, I'm not an expert in this, but I do know that there is some problem with the sort of like transport mechanism in autism spectrum, getting enough folate into the brain. So they're ingesting enough folate, but then it's actually getting enough folate delivered to the brain cells. And there could be a transport mechanism problem. So the answer is I can't comment specifically on Patrick's study, but yes, this is a space that there's a lot of work going on at the minute.
But it comes back to eating real food again, doesn't it? One more time. And in fact, part of the problem, I guess, with B12 is that apparently as we get older, we're not as good as, like you say, you can take it, but we're not as good at absorbing it as we get older. We lose the ability to absorb so much B12. So again, that could be part of the jigsaw of why Alzheimer's hits us as we get older.
Yeah, I think, and there are some people that haven't, there's another sort of chemical in the body that can actually, that people are just born with, that can actually affect the absorption of the B12 even from the sort of get-go. So, that's usually sort of becomes apparent. There's some people, it doesn't matter how much B12 you give them, it doesn't seem to increase their B12 levels that you then measure in the blood.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating, isn't it? With certain things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, we know for a fact, because of just the statistics, that it is getting more prevalent, that certainly cancer is out of control in how fastly it's accelerating compared to, say, 100 years ago. Diabetes, 50 years ago, children just didn't get it, and now, we see a lot of children that get it. Is that the same with Alzheimer's? Is it something that, is it are we seeing more of it now than we did, say, 100 years ago, or is it just that we're recognizing it now?
I think it's two things for Alzheimer's. So the first thing is that as age is the biggest risk factor, as we have an aging demographic, we just are going to see more of it. So, sort of put crudely, like in Roman times, people didn't live long enough. And gradually, as you know, like as people are dying less, let's say, from cancer, infection, childbirth, trauma, all these other different things, then we just are living longer. So yes, this is going to become the condition that will be a major sort of illness, and actually sort of like, you know, a big socioeconomic problem now and like for the future.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it's also, so it's becoming more common because of the aging demographic, but in addition to that is the fact that we now recognize it. So I think it's true to say that there's always been this sort of saying, you know, oh, like so-and-so is just getting older, so therefore, you know, the brain's that's just normal. There's something wrong with their brain because they're getting older. But actually what we recognize now with these sophisticated biomarkers, that actually there is an abnormality in the brain that is the cause of this condition. So it's not just a normal aging. And then the other thing is that as these biomarkers get more and more sophisticated, then we're actually able to detect the presence of these abnormalities in the brain. In fact, and this was one of the very first questions you asked me, in fact, even before symptoms start.
Wow.
So we're now in a position where we can potentially identify the people who are at increased risk of developing, if you like, Alzheimer's in their future. And obviously that's the sort of secret to screening. Again, a bit like picking up a high blood sugar long before someone develops symptoms of diabetes. But one has to then be very careful that you don't create a universe of worried well people by telling them that you found this, unless you have something that you can give them that will push out the time that they might otherwise start to develop these symptoms. So the big sort of, as in any disease condition, the sort of holy grail is being able to have a sophisticated biomarker that can detect evidence of an emerging problem and then provide a new treatment which can push out or slow down further progression of those symptoms. And we're sort of like, at the minute, that's very much the space that we're in, where we're able to give people early access to these sorts of treatments as they're coming through the sort of final phase of development.
I remember my team first spoke to you about 2 years ago, and you were doing clinical trials then. How are those clinical trials going? Are we close to getting a better understanding of what medication could be useful, and are you getting any results yet? Or
so the sort of answer to that is sort of like yes and no. I think that it is justifiable to be cautiously optimistic at the moment. There are a number of these new medications that are in active clinical trial at the moment. One or two are sort of beginning to get ready for sort of presentation for FDA approval, but it will still be a few years before, I believe, before the first of these are actually available on the market. But the rate of development of both interest and investment and scientific advancement in this field is sort of like exponential at the minute. So, you know, like, I mean, I think the sort of big sort of comparison is, if you think of all the new cancer drugs or antibiotics that have come on the market, say like even just in the last 6 years, there has been no new medication for Alzheimer's disease for about 16 or 17 years. And the only existing medication is what we call a symptomatic medication. So it's sort of like just sort of like razzes up the brain cells to make them work a little bit more efficiently, but it doesn't stop those brain cells from dying in the first place. And that's where the new medications, these new generation medications, are targeted. So they're actually targeted to solve the underlying problem. So yeah, I mean, we're sort of like super active in that field, because like today, that's the best thing that somebody can do if they're worried that they've got symptoms. Because, you know, if you've got something that is designed to slow something down, logically, the earlier you can get hold of it, the more effective it's going to be. So they're still in trial, but I think it's really, really fair to say people are like cautiously very optimistic.
That's fantastic.
But I think the big thing is not to forget all the things that we just can be doing all the time as well. So everything we've been talking about is just so important. And actually, there's evidence now that we can, just by diet, exercise, and sort of sleep and everything, we can reduce, as a global population, we can reduce our risk by about like 58%.
Wow.
So it's a combination of both.
That's fascinating. And of course, we didn't say then getting out in the sunshine like we keep telling everybody, but you did mention vitamin D earlier. So get out in the sunshine, exercise, drink plenty of water, sleep, good fats, not the man-made fats, nutrition-dense food, and you're on your way, which is great. Your team are brilliant. We spoke to Deborah Colson in the past. We had Matty on the other week, who was brilliant. And I know you've got a few centres across the UK now, haven't you? You're not just now in London. And if anybody wants to get in touch with your brilliant organisation, we've just put recognitionhealth.com on the screen. Thank you for that today. That was brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And I really appreciate your invitation.
Well, anything we can do to help promote you guys. I love the fact that, you're working on the future and medication, clinical trials, but you're also banging that message, 58% of it could be reduced if we just do all the things that we know we should be doing. Eat real foods, get exercise, sleep, drink plenty of water, get out in the sun. That's brilliant.
And relax and socialise.
Relax and socialise, let's never forget that. It is that 3 pillars of health, isn't it? It's social well-being, mental well-being, and physical well-being. It's this harmony that the World Health Organization have been telling us for about 70 years, but we seem to forget it all the time.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. That was the brilliant Emer MacSweeney. If you have any concerns in this area, do go and check out her website and her team. They are absolutely brilliant. They've got a centre in Birmingham and I think several in London. Is my good friend Dr. Shan Hussain around? Dr. Shan, how are you this morning?
Morning, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Hey, I love the highlights, buddy.
Oh, the grey highlights, you mean?
Mine's gone completely grey in lockdown, mate. Completely grey. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Just surviving. And we're obviously respecting the rules at the moment. I got tested on Monday and I'm negative at this moment in time. So obviously quite relieved to hear that.
Relieved, or would you rather have had it and not known you had it? Or
well, I think the test was for an acute infection as to whether you got it and you're about to come out in symptoms or not, rather than having an old infection. I'm quite relieved. Obviously, that was 2 days ago. Who knows where we are now? But yes, we are sort of opening up the lockdown a little bit. Not quite sure if I'm entirely in agreement with that. But it certainly has been effective in reducing the pressure on the NHS and the rate of infection.
Yeah, I apologise that I just quoted a comment from your book about the World Health Organization, the 3 pillars of health, which your book is the principle of the 3 pillars of health. And you wrote brilliantly and eloquently in the big prescription about how mental wellness, social wellness, and physical wellness all are sort of interrelated. That was just a fascinating chat we just had with Emma there. Give us, from a GP's point of view, around mental wellness, Alzheimer's, a few thoughts and things that you see out in the community.
Yeah, that was a fascinating chat. I didn't catch all of it, but what I did, I enjoyed very much, and I'm kind of glad that Emma kindly took on the difficult questions that you sent yesterday. There's very, very little to disagree with in what I heard of the conversation in terms of dietary factors and looking at what we can take, also from a supplement point of view. But yes, it really comes back to whole foods, healthy foods, real foods, as we're increasingly calling them, to support our brain health, but also engagements, activities, what we're doing, how we're looking after ourselves emotionally and physically to support our overall well-being, not just our brain health.
In fact, you just touched on a subject there that I like to talk about. We have to now call them real foods. And the rest is just food, when actually we shouldn't have to say real food. Everything should be real and the rest should be crap. But there we go. We have to now label stuff as real foods, which as if it's sort of the exception rather than the norm these days. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it was actually, I first heard it from Dr. Zoe Harcombe. She talks about real foods versus fake foods. And I think that's a very good way of putting it. I just feel that we need to get that information out there on more and more platforms, which is why I'm so happy that you're doing what you're doing at the moment to get this out there. But yeah, it makes sense that these are real foods. Real foods are natural foods. It's what we find, what grows on trees, or, what we dig up from the ground. And the stuff that's manufactured, packaged, processed, ultra processed in some cases, makes up over 50% of what we see in supermarkets. Now, what's worrying is that you and I probably walk past those shelves, but people out there are actually buying that stuff and eating it and believing it's actual food. And that is it's quite worrying, and it's almost certainly contributing to the amount of chronic disease we're experiencing as a population.
Yeah, because we forget, don't we? We eat food for energy, but we've got to go back to sort of biology 101 with our kids and our families and so on. That you're not just eating food for energy. That's half of the problem. That's half the reason you eat food. The other half of the reason you eat food is for the certain nutrients that we need. The seleniums, the vitamins, the zinc, the magnesium. We need all these things to have a healthy brain. And yet, quite often, and certainly with children, you can see a whole day of the food they're eating, and quite often there's virtually no nutrition in there whatsoever. And then we wonder why our kids aren't passing their exams.
Yeah, I heard a saying some years ago that we should eat for nourishment and not for pleasure. But I say, well, why can't we do both? We can actually have good, real whole foods and have them extremely pleasurable if we prepare them in the correct way and we select fresh ingredients, and we don't overindulge in our cooking techniques. So I think that's a really important thing that we mustn't lose sight of. And yes, I think the whole conversation around whole foods does need to continue to reach the entire population.
Absolutely. What have you seen in lockdown, with your own area as a GP? Are you seeing people falling into two camps, that those that have taken the lockdown as a chance to really learn more about food or change their eating habits? We've certainly seen where we live a lot more people exercising at the moment, out walking. What are you seeing sort of in your area?
So where I live, yes, we're seeing a lot of people.
We've just lost your feed.
Oh.
You just lost your feed there, Shan. It was absolutely clear as anything a second ago. I think you're back.
Right.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, got you. We just missed that last.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I was just saying that where I live, we're certainly seeing a lot of families taking their regular daily walks and coming together, and obviously everyone's social distancing when people are crossing the road, etc. And it's really nice to see that. It's really good to see so many people out and about in a healthy way, and getting sunshine, getting exercise activity. And I do hope that does continue post-lockdown, whenever that will be. In terms of where I'm working clinically, it's been interesting because I would say over the course of April, certainly the first few weeks of April, our patients were actually very respectful. They were not coming in with what would be deemed as minor problems or things that can wait for a few weeks or a few months. They were not disturbing us, and we were seeing more of the important and essential stuff that needed to be addressed straight away. And it was actually quite interesting to see that, and it was really appreciated from our practice in terms of how the service is being used. Interestingly, now that's starting to change, and we're seeing more and more of the usual stuff that we would be seeing day to day. And I think that's probably a sign of how things will start to return to normal over the coming months, I hope.
Do you think that we've had a few doctors on that are saying they're doing a lot more via sort of video, via Zoom, via Skype, FaceTime, whatever it's called, FaceTime, whatever, with patients, and they said it would be nice to to think that some of that would carry on long term, to free up a bit more time to for maybe the more serious problems. Is that a view you share, or do you think that we'll have a short memory and we'll all just go back to the way it was 3 months ago?
Well, I was actually against a lot of these concepts around telephone consultations, just because I prefer the sort of physical communication with the patient in my room, so I can see and talk to them and connect with them better. But obviously, needs must, and we had to operate in that way. We have to do that, and we're still doing that now. And in fact, over 95% of my consultations are via telephone at the moment. And it's actually been quite effective. obviously we can't examine people over the telephone. We have been asking, for example, if someone's got a rash that they're concerned about and they're happy for us to securely receive that via email, and then we'll take a look and advise and guide accordingly. But yes, sometimes we have had to call people in just to remove all doubt as to what the problem could be. And yes, I do think some of that will stay after this passes, whenever that is. I think it's been quite an efficient and effective way of working, and I think it will most likely stay to some extent.
Yeah, well, like you say, it swings and roundabouts. Nothing beats that. It's great that we've got this modern technology to stay in touch with one another, because it would have been horrendous without. But as Dr. Robert Lustig said, the empathy side of the brain doesn't kick in the same way when you're remote as when you are physically in the same room. So yeah, I suppose the jury's still out on that one. Now, for those that don't know, you do this brilliant podcast series. How's that all going at the moment?
Yes, it's going well. Thank you for calling it brilliant. Yours is brilliant too. But yes, it's going very well.
I just copied yours, mate.
Oh, you've done a lot more than that. I've really enjoyed the guests you've had. Yes, it's going well. We've got episode 41 that's just come out today. We're interviewing a lady called Vicky Pasarius, who's an author and a parenting expert. And we're talking about parenting during lockdown and the challenges that a lot of us are facing, including myself, and how we can overcome these. And it was actually a terrific conversation that we held together. And that just came out this morning. So you can check it out today. It's on Enduring Health on all major podcast providers.
It's absolutely brilliant. And stay on after we finish in a few minutes, because I've got about half a dozen of people that have been on here that I think would make superb guests for you, including Emma that was on earlier on. So much great information around sort of the brain and how we feed it. And one of the things she touched in there, which is quite interesting actually, all the things we keep banging that drum about, get out in the sunshine more, try and get a good night's sleep. Try and stay hydrated, eat real foods for goodness sake, cut down on carbs and sugars. And we say all those things to protect us from cancer, to protect us from heart disease, from diabetes. And yet the list is almost identical for the brain in what Emma was teaching us. And she touched on the microbiome as well, and especially for children, how getting the microbiome is so important for mental wellness. And many of these sort of disorders that children are facing, like autism, ADHD, and so on. It's just fascinating, isn't it, that we've just got to get back to living and balancing our life, not so much in the sense of food, but balancing our life in the way that we kind of know we should be doing.
Yes, and I think what's really interesting over the last probably 5 or 10 years or so, certainly since the time that lifestyle medicine has become popular, is that many doctors from different parts of the world have all come to the same conclusions on these areas, and we're all essentially giving the same message and working collaboratively. I've made some wonderful friends over the last few years just by getting this message out there, and similar like-minded doctors who I've never met and hadn't heard of, managing to meet them and interview them and talk about these fascinating areas that are actually so incredibly simple. And health is simple. People try to complicate it. It's actually incredibly simple just to focus on those 3 areas of health: supporting our physical bodies, our emotional well-being, and our social interactions day to day. And it can really help us take care of health in a natural way without relying on medications, pills, potions, doctors or nurses. And not only that, but actually help us to thrive, give us more energy, more focus, more clarity, and hopefully more joy and happiness in these difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one that I really resonated with me from your book is that sort of connection with others, how important you're keeping a social network of friends and being in touch with people and sharing experiences with people. And I think what we also have to do with our older generation, think of back to mum and dad at the moment. In fact, I would actually say in lockdown, we've probably spoken to my parents more than we normally do. We've been a bit naughty. We've been over to their garden on their 80th birthday. They've only done it twice. On their 80th birthday, Dad was last week, Mum was earlier this week. We put a ladder across their French patio doors, so my mum who's got Alzheimer's couldn't get out, and my kids couldn't get in. So we did our proper social distancing. but yeah, we've spent so much more time certainly on Facebook and FaceTime and Zoom with the parents, and it's just so important, isn't it, for people to be able to talk to others, and it's fascinating how that social interaction is good for the brain, it's good for our physical health. I mean, it's just got so many knock-on benefits.
Yes, very much so. I mean, I'm doing, I don't know if I mentioned this to you actually, but I've been invited to talk at the Public Health Collaboration virtual conference this weekend. And I'm going to be talking about stress as the silent killer. And one of the things that we've found, there was a study found that showed how men and women with the fewest social connections were more likely to suffer from depression and anxiety, which obviously sounds like common sense, but in actual fact, we need to really recognize the importance of social connections and do what we can to help those around us in our communities who are perhaps not really getting that sort of day-to-day connection on a physical level because, you know, we're in the lockdown period, but, you know, we can still connect in a virtual way. And, you know, like you and I are doing now, there's a lot of talk about social isolation and social distancing. We should be calling it physical isolation and physical distancing. We should still be social and make sure that we are connecting in a human way, one-to-one, where we can.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Great advice, my friend. Hey, great having you on today. I know you've got a busy schedule. I will be dialing in to listen to your speech at the PHC over the weekend. And it's great that they're still putting on that fantastic event, bringing a lot of like-minded people together. And for those who don't know about the PHC, it's called the Public Health Collaboration, a group of doctors that are trying to change things, trying to change the Eat Well guideline, trying to change the way that we educate our brilliant doctors, at med school, putting more into the prevention as opposed to just cure, and just a great group indeed. And if anyone wants to join the PHC, you go to their website and have a little look.
Yep, Steve gave a very memorable demonstration there last year about the intake of sugar, which I'm sure everyone will never forget. But yes, it's a registered charity, and it's all about how we can come together as a population to support our health. Absolutely,
yeah. That video that Shan's talking about is on YouTube further down, and I basically buried my dad and my son in sugar in a coffin, but I won't tell any more. You have to look at the YouTube video.
Yeah, definitely look at it.
Shan, thanks for coming on, my friend. Great seeing you, and I can't wait to see you in the real world. We've got lots to catch up on, and get you over to the Primal building really soon. And if you want to just stay on the line, Jack, can we carry on a chat just after? Is that all right? We'll come back to you in just a couple of minutes, mate. Cheers. That was the brilliant Dr. Shan Hussain, a GP, an author, a public speaker, and his podcast series is fascinating. It's called Enduring Health. And like I said, he's just put up a new one today, and I know you can find that on YouTube, you can find it on Spotify, and you can find it on iTunes. Thank you to everybody for being with us today. What great guests we've had on. I hope you learned as much as I learned from the brilliant Emer MacSweeney and her team. Sorry I haven't got around to answering all your questions. We'll promise we'll do a lot more interaction tomorrow. Until then, tell everybody about the show. Do set, if you've not yet done that, a subscription to it. It's completely free. Because as of Monday, when we're not there live every day, we will still be adding a Fat and Furious podcast once a week, and we will be putting up 2 or 3 new delicious recipes that I'd hate you to miss out on. So if you can, subscribe to the channel. If you can, give it the thumbs up. If you can, share it with all your loved ones and ring the little notification bell. We can stay in touch together for the long haul. Thank you very much to all your donations, also on Just Giving. Thank you to my son, Jack, to our brilliant guests. Until tomorrow, please stay safe.